So how do you work with it? What are the steps to set yourself free? Well, the first step, and I've already kind of given you clues, is to update your mental software. Your mental software. Because your past has created 3 areas of belief and attitude about yourself, first of all. What is my beliefs and attitudes about myself that came from my experiences in the past, and my perception and what meaning I attached to the past. That's one thing, one area that you begin to think and feel and evaluate, and then you can begin to change and update it to the truth and to who you truly are. An example, I've used this example in the past. One of my clients, who was kind of stuck in his self-pity and martyrhood, and he was talking about how his life hasn't been able to amount to anything because no matter what, he sabotages, he procrastinates, he does all these things, and he had these addictive responses, and he was blaming his mother. If only my mother told me I wouldn't amount to anything. My mother told me I was a loser. My mother told me I was no good for nothing. My mother, my mother, my mother. And so after about 10 or 15 minutes of him blaming, and of course, by the way, anybody or anything that you blame is where you've given your power away. So if you want to know where your power is in the past, it's whoever you're blaming for who you are today. They hold your power. You've given it to them. The reason why is my mother. So your mother's holding on to your power. Not consciously, but you've given away your power to her. So I stopped him in the middle of the session. I said, you know what? What did your mother tell you about having sex before marriage? Well, she said not to do it. I said, okay, did you? He goes, yeah, I did. I go, why? Why did you do it? He goes, well, because I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe her. I said, oh. So you're choosing to believe that you're a loser and you're never going to amount to anything because your mother said that. But when it came to sex, it's like, no, I don't want to believe that. So who's choosing and causing you to be a loser? Your mother or your choice of what you want to believe in? Do you see that? There's a big shift there, and he had this little aha experience. And it began to unravel his romance with his victim consciousness, his self-pity, poor me, and his blame. Because he would never, ever be able to change unless he got his mother to change. And she was already dead. So that ain't going to happen. So you see my point? You choose and you adopted. Those 2 boys, Danny and David, they chose what to believe about themselves in relationship to their father. One chose to be a victim and poor me and see how bad and awful he ruined my life. And the other one decided to make his life into this grand thing, all motivated by the same man. My point being is, you have so much more power than you recognize. And everything in your past happened to you. What meaning have you given it? What meaning did you give it to when your father died when you were 5 years old? What meaning did you give it to that abuse that you had? What meaning did you give it about yourself? Because that's something you can change today as you become conscious of it. And as you respond rather than react, as you take responsibility to say, I am keeping this alive. The past is over. The events have happened, and they are done. But it's the emotion and the recollection and the memories that is living and breathing inside of you, and you can change those. You can take your power back from those that you blame, because that's another way to keep stuck. And as you take full responsibility, you can create not only positive changes now, but you can open up to the magic and miracles of an amazing future. And most people can get that intellectually, but it's the emotional body that they don't feel it. And if you can get that intellectually and feel it emotionally, then things change. Even in the Bible it says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. That's a Bible quote. What does that mean? As a man thinketh in his heart means as a man thinketh with feeling. And you see the big conflict that people have is they have all these intellectual ideas, but they don't deal with their emotions. And they still feel unworthy. They still feel not good enough. And even though intellectually I'm going to say my affirmations, I'm lovable, I'm lovable, I'm lovable, I got to change the feeling of being unlovable. I got to change my image of myself. And that's when it starts to come together. So important. And I talk about the paradox of positive thinking. Because the mind, the intellect, is very fast. It goes 90 miles an hour. The intellect is very fast. And it's often separated from the emotional body, which is very slow. And so the paradox of positive thinking is to go around and say, oh yeah, I'm happy, I'm positive, everything's great. I'm just going to say all the right words, all the things. Oh yes, I'm grateful. Oh yes, I'm thankful. Oh yes, everything's going great. Everything happens for the best. Everything's happening in my life perfectly. Everything blah, 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 blah. And yet you're riddled with anger and riddled with rage and riddled with unresolved feelings. Then that is not ever going to create positivity in your life. Just saying the words and using the intellect, you need to bring the two together, meaning I need to turn my intellect into my emotional body and resolve so I can feel the gratitude that's beneath the repressed anger and hurt and disappointment. I gotta release and clear that stuff out so I can lift my vibration where I'm truly being positive and feeling it. So when I tell people the paradox of positive thinking is the most positive thing you can do is be 100% brutally honest with yourself. And if you know deep down that you're hurt and disappointed and have anger, and you're trying to be positive, to ignore my feelings, to run from them, it's never going to work. I need to be honest and say, you know what? Yeah, I am angry. I am upset. I am disappointed. Not to keep it alive, but with the intention of then admitting the truth, and then I can change it and respond to it. But if I pretend it's not there, if I discount it, I deny it, I distract myself, then it's just going to be there affecting my energy, affecting my aura, resonating in my subconscious mind, creating all kinds of negativity in my life, attracting more reasons to be angry. You see, when you repress your anger and your self-pity, then you have to attract and create more reasons, more experiences to get angry about and to feel sorry for yourself about. And that's just the way it goes. It's the law of attraction. And likewise, when you can clear that stuff out, feel it, express it, release it, forgive yourself, forgive others, and let it go, and lift that energy out, then you get to the depth of your being, which is where your passion is. It's just where your purpose is found. It's where your creativity lies. It's where your soul and spirit and the life force energy exists. And that starts to come to the surface, and you start to feel the joy of who you are. Free from the encumbrances and the baggage of the past. What's real about the past, what keeps it alive today, and some clues and hints on what you can do to begin to set yourself free. What we learn to do as little children, what the ego does to try to get to know itself. The journey of the ego begins as a little child, an infantile ego, and your ego in the infantile stage is trying to protect itself. So its greatest concern is, am I getting enough? Am I getting enough love? Am I getting enough attention? Am I getting enough food? Am I getting enough sleep? Am I getting enough attention? Am I getting enough? That's what the focus of the infantile ego is. It is rooted in and grounded in, am I getting enough? And it's necessary to keep you alive. You needed to go through that as an infant child. And as that infant child grows and realizes it's not the only thing in the world, because an infant child is totally self-centered. The world revolves around it. And truly it did, didn't it? When you were little and you were hungry, you cried and mother came running with a bottle. When you're tired, you cried and they put you to the bed. Whatever you wanted, the world revolved around you. Self-centered, the infantile ego, and fixated on my getting enough. And then that little ego child begins to grow into the 3 and the 4-year-old, the terrible 2, starting to explore everything, trying to figure out the world, and realizes for the first time that your emotions are separate from mother's. Because when you're an infant, you're often feeling your mother's feelings. You finally break free emotionally. around the 3 to 4 year old, and you realize my feelings are separate than mother's feelings. Being in her for 9 months, you were one, you were connected. And then that little child realizes, hey, wait a second, there's other people here. I've got brothers, I've got sisters, I've got neighbors, I've got classmates. I'm not the only thing in the world. So it shifts from being self-centered to being self-important. Okay, yes, I understand. I have brothers, I have sisters, but I'm still the most important thing. And that self-importance and your need then to fit in and belong shifts and lifts the security of, am I getting enough, to competing and to comparing yourself. Comparing yourself to your brothers or sisters, competing with them. To compare and to compete with classmates. And then you shift your drive as a child ego from, am I getting enough as the infant, to, am I good enough as a child? And that's what drives you to try to be good enough, to try to fit in, to try to conform, to try to be good enough for what? To be good enough to belong, to be good enough to be loved. And those are the two first topics of this year of belonging. I spoke on first part of this month, being loved. Being loved. And then I spoke about overcoming resistance to change, which was last week. All of them part of my course library coming together. You see this big picture starting to come together as I come up with these topics. There's a reason for it. Sometimes I don't realize it, but my soul knows exactly what's going on. I just trust the intuition and the impulse to teach certain classes. So, the child ego is then fixated. Am I good enough? Am I good enough? And then you start to grow and mature into the adolescent, right? You start to expand your world from your neighbors to your school to the community, and you start to go into high school, and you start to realize, I've got to figure out what I'm going to do. I'm moving into being a grown-up. My body forcing you, all of us, our bodies forcing us to grow up through hormones kicking in and the body's growing pains and the body's changing and growing hair and all the stuff that happens in puberty. So that ego starts to get panicked. It's out of control. Oh my God, I'm out of control. All this stuff's happening and I'm moving quickly forward. And I'm like, what? I gotta make sure I figure this stuff out, right? I gotta get myself together. I gotta get my life together. I gotta get good grades. I gotta figure out what I want to do in college. If I go to college, and what I'm going to do for a living. So the shift in focus of the ego moves from, am I good enough, to the adolescent, am I doing enough? Am I learning enough? Am I achieving enough? And that becomes the next plate that you spin on the ego level. So, granted, that doesn't mean you stop the other two plates, but it becomes the major focus. In other words, your whole life you're wondering about getting enough. Do I get enough attention? Do I get enough love? There's a certain part of you that will still spin that plate. And then you're still going to be wanting to be good enough, of course. But it doesn't become the primary focus. And as an adolescent, you then focus on, am I doing enough? Am I learning enough? Am I achieving enough? And that becomes the primary focus of the adolescent you. And why I'm bringing this up is I'm helping you to see the structure on an emotional level of the stages of your past. And hear this. The stages and the parts of your past that are still alive within you emotionally. You are still functioning with the emotional child inside of you, with the emotional adolescent and the infant, and then the teenager, young adult, or grown-up, I should say, the teenager and grown-up. And so as you realize the adolescent, the teenager, the grown-up, I have these parts of my consciousness that I need to make peace with in order for me to fully be empowered. So, you have to work with healing that infant child, giving them the love that they wanted. In your consciousness, in a meditation, closing your eyes, going back and loving that child. If you were born premature, you have ADD or any of those kind of things that were out of balance from a very early age, go back into time in your imagination, closing your eyes, seeing that little infant baby that you once were, holding them, loving them, filling them with love and energy. Because what you're doing is you're connecting with that part of your consciousness that still is living and breathing inside of you today. The past is over with. You've grown beyond it, but on an emotional level, you have a child, an adolescent, and a teenager, and you always will. You always will. So take that little infant baby and see their little sweet face and put your forehead upon their forehead and send them a link and connection to your soul. Send them the light and the love and the healing. See them at peace, knowing they're getting enough attention and love, and asking your higher self, your soul, to help that part of you to become at peace, to heal. And you can do that. Even though the, quote, past physically is over with, emotionally it's still living and breathing inside of you. So you hold that and you put your forehead and you just send them and connect. You're doing a mind meld. You're melding and connecting your mind with that part of you and loving it and accepting it and understanding it and bringing it to peace. And then you move forward. Another sitting at the same time where you find and discover the child in you. You close your eyes, you go into meditation, you go back into the past, into the house, into the apartment, into the home that you lived in. And you go back into the bedroom where that child is sleeping in the middle of the night. And you can, that's what's great about meditation, is you can go between time and beyond space to reconnect with that part of you. Smell the smells of the room. Look around, see that old poster of Farrah Fawcett on the wall, or that poster of Starsky and Hutch, or whoever, was your popular fans that you decorated your room. See your old clothing, see those things that were important to you. Reconnect in your consciousness, in your memory. What's real about your past? Your memory. Reconnect. And then see that little child that's sleeping in the bed and see their innocence. That all they ever wanted to know was that they were good enough. And you can sit on that bed and they will suddenly wake up, or you can startle them awake a little bit. And that'll be like having a dream. In their reality, it'll be like having this dream that forever changed them. And because their future self, called you, cared enough to go back and to send energy to that part of you that is living and breathing. And you sit on the bed and you look at their innocence, you see it, maybe for the first time. Look through the eyes of love, look through the eyes of your soul. Set your intention, ask your higher self, your soul, to help you to heal that little child so that they know that they're enough. And you might even sense this beautiful ball of light surrounding the child. That is your soul and your higher self. And then they're going to think it's a dream, that you're a fairy godfather or godmother. Fairy godfather doesn't quite sound right, does it? He's got a machine gun on his back. Fairy godfather. Fairy godmother, this magical being that is you, your future, their future self. And in their reality, which still exists, you can help them to come to peace, to free them from the pain of the past, by letting them know you matter to me. You are good enough for me. And let them know that I am your future and I've come back to be your friend. And just hold that little child. Give them the love in your imagination, in a meditation. So powerful, so powerful to change instantly who you are today. And that is 2 techniques to work with. The third one is to then, and at another sitting, you don't want to do this all at once. You don't want to rush through this. You want to do this and do it intently. Do it with purpose. Do it with love. So perhaps, 3 days later, you go into another meditation. And this time you want to connect with the adolescent, teenager part of you. Talk to them. Listen to them. What were they afraid of? What happened to them? What happened with that first puppy love of who they fell in love with? The disappointment, the hurt. And let them know that they matter. And that you, hear this, what the adolescent seeks. The child seeks perfect love. The child seeks perfect love. The adolescent seeks perfect understanding. Because it was going through those hormone changes. Things were happening. They were growing up. They're trying to compete and compare and figure themselves out. They didn't understand what was happening. They felt totally confused and lost and panicked. They're panicked. But as you go back and you can, who better than you to understand that child and that adolescent? Because you were once them. You know exactly what they went through. So you do understand. Of all the people that misunderstand them, that don't get who they are, you do. And you can go back and give them, I understand. You can rely upon me. I'm here to support you, to be your friend, to connect with them, and to love them. That's the third stage of inner child work to do. And I know I'm kind of covering this quickly, but trust yourself in the process. Trust yourself in the process. It's not like you have to follow each little step perfectly. If you go into a meditation and all of a sudden you see your adolescent, then work with them there first. It doesn't mean you have to start with your infant. But whatever comes up, be spontaneous. But the most important thing to do is ask for help. Asking your higher self, your soul, to help you. I'm ready now to set myself free from the past, and I need your help to heal the pain in the past. I need to heal and release the old anger, the disappointment, the feeling of not being good enough. I need to heal this, and I need your help. So you set your intention, and your subconscious mind is listening, and your higher self and soul will help you. But they won't do it for you unless you ask. They honor your free will. Or if you're one of those people, like I was for so many years, being stubborn and have to do it all myself, ask for help. Then go in, connect with the infant, with the child, with the adolescent. Because, you as a grown-up, hopefully becoming adult, but you as a grown-up, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. We're not quite done with talking about the stages of your ego's growth and what it means to become the spiritually empowered adult. I'm going to continue that conversation, so bear with me. But let's say you want a loving, intimate, connected relationship. You, the grown-up. You, the grown-up, I want this in my life. But I have an infant that is always concerned about, am I getting enough? Am I getting enough? And I have a child that's always trying to compete and compare with anybody I date to try to be good enough, to try to prove I'm good enough. Needing validation, constant validation. Or the adolescent that's always, am I doing enough, learning enough, achieving enough, feeling misunderstood and unappreciated and taken advantage of. And these three parts of me, the adolescent terrified of intimacy. The child doesn't even know what it is and doesn't want to get too close because it doesn't want anybody to know it's secret, that it's not good enough. And so you have the teenager, the child, the adolescent that are wounded, and yet you, the grown-up, wants to have this loving, powerful relationship. Well, guess what? It's 3 or 4 against 1. They're going to win out until you go back and heal and get them to be on your side where they know that they're enough and that they function with greater love and understanding. And then you can create the loving relationship with ease and with elegance and with magic. So it's like you have parts of your consciousness that are conflicted. And these, until you resolve the conflicts in your consciousness, you'll never have the magic and miracles and the ease and the freedom that you could potentially have in your life. So now, what's the next stage of the adolescent, of the ego? The immature ego. Infant, child, adolescent, teenager / adolescent, teenager. Because adolescence goes into like being 20, 21, college years, late bloomers, and all that stuff. And then the ego becomes a grown-up, where they finally decide that life is about mediocrity, just fitting in. Let me just do the best I can, which is never good enough. Let me try to, compete, but lose most of the time. I'm always comparing myself and feeling less than. And I become a grown-up who kind of abandons their potential. Let me just get through life. Let me just make sure I have enough money to pay the bills, get food on the table, to exist. Sit in front of the TV with my beer and my pizza at night and watch it. Don't have time or energy to exercise because I'm repressing and depressing all this emotional energy that's keeping me listless and powerless. So who wants to exercise? I don't have time. I just want to numb out. I just want to numb out and drink beer and go into my addictive responses to cope and to get through life. Life's a bitch and then you die. That's the grown-up, immature ego. And it all hinges upon recognizing, acknowledging, forgiving, and healing and changing those parts of yourself. Recognizing they're there, acknowledging, if I don't do anything about it, it's never going to get done. I'm the only one who can respond and heal myself. I'm the only one who has the power to retrieve the power from the past, to transform these parts of me. And do I love myself enough? Do I believe in my potential of a positive, brilliant future? And as your soul awakens, which all of you it has, you wouldn't be listening to this if it hasn't. I don't attract people who deny their soul. That they find me weird, which is fine. But you, that soul has awoken to say, I'm ready to fulfill my empowered destiny. And there's a spark of hope. There's a spark of passion. There's a spark of love that comes from deep within you, that is truly who you are, has begun to awaken and expand. For some of you, it might be fully brilliant and bright, and you've been functioning with it for many, many years. But the grown-up has an opportunity to choose to take your power back, to choose to know that there's something more to you than just existing and getting through and paying your bills, that there is this potential, and that within you is a soul and a spirit. And even though I don't quite understand what all that means, and even though my religions in the past have twisted and distorted it or made me even just want to abandon it altogether, it's still true. I have a soul and a spirit. I am a spiritual being, regardless of what religion you belong to or not. You can't not be who you are. You are an empowered, hear that, spiritual being. Yes, you set your power down. Yes, you abandoned it. Yes, you did. But it's time now to pick it back up. And when you choose to do that and take responsibility and to start to self-reflect and to start to meet your own needs, you step into becoming the adult. Being the adult is always a choice. It doesn't happen automatically. Your body forces you to become a grown-up. And how many grown-ups do you know in your reality that are still functioning? This 75-year-old woman that's going through the Morrison's cafeteria, and her inner infant that's still running her life is like, am I getting the biggest piece of pie? Am I getting the biggest dessert? Am I getting enough? Am I getting enough? Or have you dated somebody who's always trying to prove they're good enough? Am I good enough? Tell me I'm great. Tell me how wonderful I'm. Pat me on the back. Never enough validation. Always on that hamster wheel. Perhaps it's you. Perhaps it's you. And as you can be honest, remember that word about the most positive thing you can do in your reality is to be honest with yourself, tell yourself the truth. Why? Then I can change it. So let me own who I've become. And if I'm stuck in, am I doing enough, learning enough, achieving enough, am I trying to be that adolescent, I'll go onto your website and download all your meditations and read all this. And am I doing enough? Am I learning enough? Am I doing enough? Slow it down. Slow it down. But don't feel that rush. Slow it down. What do you need today? But that could be, you might be on that adolescent teenage, letting that ego in you remain immature and ending up being stuck as a grown-up versus choosing to be the adult.